You scoop a spoonful of sugar into your coffee. Tiny white crystals fall like clean, perfect snow. It looks simple, pure, almost sterile. That bright white sugar started out dark brown, sticky, and full of plant debris. And to turn a muddy plant juice into those flawless crystals, factories run it through a sequence of crushing, boiling, filtering, spinning, and chemical trickery that sounds closer to oil refining than cooking. So the real question isn't how sugar is made, it's how something so messy ends up looking this perfectly white. At its core, sugar is just one molecule: sucrose. Chemically, it's a precise pairing of two smaller sugars, glucose and fructose. Plants manufacture it during photosynthesis, moving it through their tissues as an energy currency. When we eat it, our bodies break that molecule apart again, releasing energy almost instantly. But the crystals in your sugar bowl didn't appear naturally in that neat form. In plants, sucrose is dissolved in water-rich sap, mixed with pigments, minerals, proteins, waxes, and microscopic bits of plant fiber. It's cloudy, earthy, sometimes even greenish. Two plants dominate global sugar production: sugarcane, a tall tropical grass that stores sweet juice inside its stalks, and sugar beet, a dense root that accumulates sucrose underground. Together, they supply almost all of the world's table sugar. Yet the white granules we recognize are not how sugar exists in nature. Those crystals are a highly refined engineered form, produced by forcing dissolved sugar molecules to organize themselves into perfectly repeating structures. That matters more than it sounds, because crystalline sugar stores for years without spoiling, dissolves consistently in recipes, and delivers predictable sweetness every time. The entire modern food industry depends on that reliability. But for most of human history, sugar looked nothing like the clean white crystals we know today. And this is where the story takes a darker turn. For most of human history, sugar wasn't white. It wasn't even really a crystal. It was thick, brown, and closer to molasses paste than the tidy grains sitting in modern kitchens. The earliest sugar production began in India more than 2,000 years ago, when people discovered that boiling sugarcane juice slowly caused sweet crystals to form. Early Sanskrit texts refer to these crystals as sharkara, meaning gravel or small stones. That word eventually traveled through languages and became the English word sugar. The process was simple but crude. Farmers crushed sugarcane with wooden rollers, boiled the juice over open fires, and scraped off whatever crystals formed as the liquid thickened. The result was brown, sticky, and full of impurities. But it was incredibly valuable. By the time sugar reached medieval Europe through Arab trade routes, it was so rare it was treated like medicine. Apothecaries sold it in tiny amounts to treat stomach problems, coughs, and wounds. Then demand exploded. Europe wanted sweetness on a scale that traditional methods couldn't supply. And this is where the story becomes complicated. To meet that demand, vast sugar plantations spread across the Caribbean and the Americas in the 1600s and 1700s. These plantations relied on forced labor and enslaved people, making sugar one of the most profitable and most brutal commodities in global trade. At the time, sugar still wasn't white. Most of what Europeans consumed was raw brown sugar, known as muscovado. It contained molasses, plant pigments, and minerals that gave it its dark color and sticky texture. Refining it into cleaner, lighter sugar required specialized refineries in cities like London, Amsterdam, and Lisbon. Workers would dissolve raw sugar, filter it, and recrystallize it repeatedly to make it paler and purer. But the process was slow, inconsistent, and expensive. Factories needed a way to turn enormous quantities of plant juice into clean crystals quickly and reliably. And solving that problem required something that looked less like cooking and more like industrial chemistry. The story begins in a field. Sugarcane towers above the ground like a wall of grass, sometimes 4 meters tall. Inside those thick stalks is a sweet liquid that can contain 10 to 15% sucrose by weight. Once harvested, the clock starts ticking. Cut cane begins losing sugar almost immediately as microbes and enzymes break it down. So trucks rush the stalks to the mill within hours. The first step is pure brute force. At the factory, giant rotating knives shred the cane into fibrous strips. These shredded stalks pass through a series of heavy steel rollers that squeeze them again and again, pressing out every drop of juice. What comes out looks nothing like table sugar. It's a murky green liquid filled with soil, plant fragments, waxes, and organic compounds. The leftover crushed fiber, called bagasse, doesn't go to waste. Most mills burn it as fuel to power the factory's boilers. But the real work happens in the liquid. The juice is pumped into large tanks and heated. Then something surprising is added: lime, chemically known as calcium hydroxide. This step solves the first big problem. Raw plant juice is slightly acidic and full of dissolved impurities. Adding lime raises the pH and causes many of those impurities to clump together and precipitate. The mixture is heated again, and the clumps rise to the top or sink to the bottom, where they can be filtered out. Now the liquid is clearer, but it's still mostly water. So the next stage is evaporation. Factories run the juice through massive multi-effect evaporators, tall steel vessels where steam boils off water in stages. Each stage uses the heat from the previous one, making the system extremely energy efficient. As water disappears, the syrup thickens. Eventually, it reaches a point where sugar molecules start crowding together. Chemists call this a supersaturated solution, a liquid holding more dissolved sugar than it normally could. And that's when crystals begin to grow. Factories seed the syrup with tiny existing crystals, giving the molecules something to build onto. Inside large vacuum pans, the syrup slowly cools and thickens as sucrose molecules lock themselves into repeating crystal patterns. The mixture that forms is called massacrete, a dense slurry of crystals and syrup. To separate them, factories use enormous centrifuges that spin thousands of times per minute. The spinning force throws the syrup outward while solid sugar crystals remain behind. At this stage, the crystals are still brown. That color comes from molasses, the thick syrup coating each grain. And this is where the transformation to white sugar really begins. For years, one rumor has followed sugar everywhere: that the white color comes from bleach. But refined sugar is not bleached with household chlorine bleach. The color disappears for a simpler reason. Most of the brown color in raw sugar comes from molasses, which contains plant pigments, minerals, and organic compounds. When refineries wash and separate molasses away from the crystals, the color goes with it. What remains is almost pure sucrose, and pure sucrose crystals are naturally colorless. In the 19th century, many refineries filtered syrup through bone char, a carbon material produced by heating animal bones. Its porous structure trapped color molecules while letting sugar pass through. Today, some factories still use bone char, while others use activated carbon or ion exchange systems. The filter material never becomes part of the sugar, but the practice still sparks debate. The reason sugar ends up as perfect crystals comes down to a rule of chemistry. When sugar dissolves, the molecules float freely in water. But as water evaporates and the solution becomes supersaturated, those molecules begin locking together. Once a tiny crystal forms, it becomes a template. More molecules attach to its surface in a repeating geometric pattern. Layer by layer, the crystal grows. Factories carefully control temperature, pressure, and concentration, so this growth happens evenly. Individual sucrose crystals are transparent, but when millions of them pile together, they scatter light in every direction. It's the same reason snow appears white even though ice is clear. The whiteness of sugar is simply light bouncing through countless microscopic crystals. Tomorrow morning, the ritual will look the same. Coffee steaming, spoon dipping into the sugar bowl, a quiet cascade of white crystals falling into the cup. Nothing about it suggests giant steel mills, boiling vacuum chambers, or centrifuges spinning thousands of times per minute. Yet every grain went through that journey. It began as cloudy plant juice in a field. It was crushed, filtered, heated, purified, and crystallized until billions of molecules lined up in perfect order. Then those crystals piled together. That's why it looks white, not bleach, not dye, just light scattering through countless transparent crystals. Which means the simplest ingredient in your kitchen is actually the end result of one of the largest crystallization processes humans run every day. A piece of industrial chemistry hiding in plain sight.